You survived the weekend. We survived the weekend. I'm going to say the same thing, though. I would love for you to subscribe to the Raging Moderates YouTube channel. Scott agrees with me. Scott, make a face like you agree with me.
Subscribe now, bitches.
That actually worked well when you said subscribe now, bitches, before. So subscribe now, bitches, in my nicer tone. Thanks.
Welcome to Raging Moderates. I'm Scott Galloway.
And I'm Jessica Tarlov.
Today, we are joined by Senator Ruben Gallego from Arizona. He joined the Senate this year after a decade in the House of Representatives. Senator, it's great to see you. Thanks for being with us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So I'll kick it off here. Senate Democrats are going to get the vote on extending the ACA subsidies that John Thune promised during the shutdown. And it looks as if Republicans are scrambling to release their own health care plans. Senators Cassidy and is it Crapo? I hope I got that wrong.
I think Crapo, yeah.
I actually changed the spelling because it is spelled Crapo, but I knew that you were going to ask about this, so I put the E in there for you, Scott.
So that's what happens here, Senator, is my staff saves me from myself. So They released their bill last night. Bernie Moreno and Susan Collins also have a bill. Do you think, give us the state of play around what you think is going on, realpolitik on the ground there, and what you think of each of these bills?
Well, actually, I think what's actually going on is that the right wing and anti-Affordable Health Care Act portion of the party that just wants to get rid of it are using the fact that Donald Trump is dumb when it comes to health insurance and a lot of other things, but when it comes to health insurance, and the fact that he hates Obamacare. And they're using this opportunity to basically kill this portion of the Affordable Health Care Act with the longer goal of just getting rid of it altogether. Because in any real politics situation, this is a man that's going state to state and trying to redistrict the hell out of every state so they can control the House going into 2026. The most logical thing you should do is punt this for a couple years, because it doesn't matter how much you redistrict all these states. If you screw up health insurance, you're going to lose the House. And so right now, his own party, people that he trusts, are basically using his both ignorance as well as, I think, some of his personal prejudice against Affordable Health Care Act and Obama to extend some of their policy goals. And he's going to get screwed in the end because of it. And the people that are really going to get screwed are the moderate Republicans that are on these marginal districts. And that's just marginal districts now. I think this is going to go pretty bad. I'm the one who buys the health insurance in the family. I'm the one that always does the open enrollment. The largest day for open enrollment on ACA is December 15th. If you don't have a plan by December 15th, that means you don't have insurance starting January 1st. These guys have basically screwed it up. No matter what they do later to undo it, it's done. They screwed it up. And anything they try to do, any effort they try to do after December 15th is only going to be more confusing. And I just don't think they realize what just impacted them.
So I apologize for the temperature switch here, but I want to go more meta just on healthcare because we got a lot to cover today. $13,000 per capita on spending on healthcare versus $6,500 for the remaining 6 of the G7. 1 in 5 consumers are happy with their health care. So in exchange for paying double what other developed nations pay, we live less long, we're more obese, we're more anxious. Yep. And it feels like our arguments right now are around the symptoms, not the underlying disease, and not real structural reform. What do you think of the idea of moving to single-payer health care, or more specifically, universal health coverage?
Well, I think, number one, stop the bleeding, which is what we're dealing right now with the ACA. But the ACA, I think, isn't the long-term solution for this country. I do think we need to have some type of system that is a mixture of single payer. There's also, you got to remember, there's a lot of people that actually do like, for example, a lot of unions and love their union negotiated healthcare. So we have to keep that option open. I think a public option has to be the option, but we do have to focus as Democrats when we get back into power to bringing down the cost of healthcare, bringing up the quality, and yes, to have a universal element to it where everyone is covered in one way or the other. The problem that we have, and we just didn't do, is when we had power, when we had Biden with a trifecta, we never used it. And some of it was because of the internal politics. We had some conservative senators that just didn't want to move. But we do need to have a bigger thinking agenda that is actually going to make people understand that we are the party that's going to make your life better. And when it comes to healthcare, it doesn't just mean coverage. It does mean affordability and quality too.
Jess?
Yeah. Well, you've already gotten into the stuff I was excited to talk about. So our producer is going to be upset because there were some newsy questions, but I want to talk to you like about midterms and kind of the goals for fixing some of the drawbacks, I guess, of the Democratic Party right now. Scott already touched on one. Just stopping the bleeding obviously matters, but Obamacare needs real reform. Yes. And you mentioned, the word of the last few months, affordability. And we just saw that Trump's going to give a $12 billion bailout to the farmers, taken from his tariff coffers, but a problem that he caused himself.
Right.
Do you think that the bailout is good policy and that we should be doing it? And how do you think that if Democrats take the House back in 2026, that we can, help at least somewhat to get back on economic track in the country?
Well, number one, I don't think it's good policy because you're basically always going to be able to follow up bad policy making with like a payoff. And that's what's happening here. It's also not going to bring down the costs because, these farmers are going to be able to at least stay on their farms, which is great, but they don't have any markets to send their food to next year. There's no contracts next year. So all they're going to do is they're not going to go and, plant as much as they need for, our country and for their foreign market. So next year, we're going to actually end up having more and more scarcity. So Trump just doesn't understand how that world works. So I'm glad we don't want people to lose their farms because once they lose them, it's hard. But in terms of actually bringing down the cost for everyday Americans, it's not going to happen because of that. So he got the political payoff, but everyday consumers aren't going to get any of the payoff of this because there is no markets. These farmers are basically going to just try to, hold on to as long as they can. Now, what Democrats do when we get back is that we need to bring back markets for these people to sell to, right? If you do that, then they actually start supplying, they start creating and hopefully bring down commodities, and that actually helps everybody else. So what does that look like? Don't get into stupid fights to begin with. We have a fight with Brazil because we're unhappy how their judicial system is treating an ex-insurrectionist president. And so now we're taxing all their beef and all their coffee coming into this country. That is a tax on working class Americans. Trust me, even when we were poor in my family, the one thing we had every day, not necessarily beef, was coffee. And if you don't think it's the opposite, it's also one of the largest economies in the world. And now they're not buying U.S. Commodities. Colombia, a place where my family is from, as close as it is to Brazil, used to get most of its soybeans from the United States because they wanted to keep a close relationship to us. They're cutting up their contracts with the United States and now getting Brazilian soybean contracts. We're not going to get that market back for quite a while. So number one, stop being stupid about who we're picking fights with. I think also there needs to be a real understanding of what's happening with the middle working class right now. The middle class doesn't exist in this country. The middle class is barely making it by, right? And there's a certain level of resentment that happens with this class because they feel like they are working so hard, but they are not poor enough to get subsidies, but they're not rich enough to feel comfortable. There needs to be a real understanding when Democrats get back into power about how to deal with that middle class that is hurting right now, feels like they're just drowning and no one really thinks about them or works at it. And so going back to basics, increasing the minimum wage, to what I think should at least be $20 an hour. We should make sure there's a child tax credit for these families. I have 3 kids now. I don't need it, but there's a lot of families that, are making $80,000 a year with 2 kids and they're not making it. Childcare support, all these things that need to be direct into people's lives and into their checking accounts to really make up for the fact that they've gotten screwed for the last 7 years because of inflation, while we've been getting tax cuts to the biggest and richest corporations and men and women in this country. Like, that is a focus that we need to take right away. That's how I think we win the next decade. If the first time Democrats take over power of the House, the White House, House of Representatives, and the Senate, we fully have an economic agenda that brings the middle class truly into the middle class and not just, stringing them along and hoping that we could, help them with a program here or a program there.
Yeah, it's really important. And we just talked about last week that kind of viral Substack post about how $140,000 is now kind of just around the poverty line if you're in a middle class suburb in New Jersey, which,
Sure.
Different numbers certainly than the calculations are working with. I think it's at
But I mean, like in Arizona, it's a relatively used to be a relatively cheap state, $100,000 a family of four, you're making it. But like the American dream is not to make it. The American dream is to succeed, to be comfortable, right? Like no one ever said, God, I really hope one day I could be barely making it by and hope that one day I could retire. Families aren't doing what they used to do. Like, they can't go on vacations. They're like the level of economic stresses people have, even when they're doing well, it's not changing. A lot of it's because there's been a cost shift that the burdens that used to be kind of public are now personal, and wages still haven't kept up with that.
So I think you're especially qualified to answer this question. You were an enlisted man in the Marines. I believe you served in Iraq with Lima Group. Is that correct, sir?
Lima Company 325.
Lima Company 325, which was a group, my understanding is that endured or registered real heavy casualties. So you have seen war.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I'm curious just to get your thoughts on the boat strikes off the coast of Venezuela, and more generally, just the idea of offering quarter to enemy combatants who are no longer considered a lethal threat.
Well, so let me give you a perspective. So we were fighting in an area called Al-Anbar in the height of the insurgency. We took quarter insurgents. Well, not only did we take quarter insurgents, we took quarter insurgents that we shot and we gave them medical attention. Why did we do that? Number one, the rule of war, law of war. But number two, there's actually smart reason why we did this. And this is what my platoon commander explained to me. If the insurgents know that you are going to give grace, that
Right.
if injured and they stop fighting, that you will give them quarter and you will medically take care of them, they're less likely to fight you to the death.
Right.
Do you want someone fighting you to the death all the time? Or do you want someone willing to give up and stop fighting and not put yourself and your men in a serious position? That's one of the logical reasons why you do it. The other reason I felt at least comfortable about my position and role in this war is that even though I thought the war was illegal, I at least conducted myself at the utmost honor of what the Marine Corps taught me. And when people give up and when people, stop fighting, I treated them humanely. You don't want to make these young men and women do things that they're going to regret later in life because their commanding officer wanted to, get a rise because he got to say that he killed a bunch of innocent people. So, that's the secondary reason. And lastly, again, this is just a very simple thing. We should be the good guys. We should be the good guys. During World War II, you would hear all these stories of the Germans lining up POWs and shooting them. The Japanese basically killed thousands of our men on the Bataan Death March. They would shoot people in the oceans after their ship went down. We were always the good guys during World War II, right? And even during some of the height of the insurgencies, and there's little mistakes here and there, and there was people that did violate the law of war during the Iraq War. There was no set policy from the government that we were going to do it versus individuals that were doing it. And so there was always this, as hard as the insurgents were, and we had some insurgents that were horrible. They, did fight to the end. They, set traps to suicide houses, everything else like that. But we were still the good guys of how we conducted ourselves. We could say that we didn't do that. And you want to talk about what happened in off the coast of Venezuela. One of the things that we used to always worry about in combat was if we would roll up to a scene and one of it, especially after some guys got hit, we'd have to be very careful about what we were doing because we knew the insurgents would come back and hit us again while we're trying to evacuate our guys because they had no concept of humanity, no concept of law of war. What we essentially did in Venezuela is what the insurgents used to do. Those guys had given up. For 45 minutes, they're bobbing in the water, and we, hit them again. And, who made that command? I don't know, but we're going to find out someday. But it is against, I think, the American spirit. It's against what we are known for. And it's a disgrace that we did that.
So traveling around the globe on the subject of war, although I guess that's not an accurate descriptor in Venezuela because we're not officially
at war.
But the war in Ukraine, we are no longer, my understanding is we're selling weapons, but we're no longer offering real economic or military support. I believe we're still offering some intelligence. Just curious to get your view on what you think America's role in that conflict is.
Look, I think number one, it's in our national interest to screw Russia over because they would do anything and have done anything to us. And the fact that there is a country that's willing to defend themselves, defend their sovereignty, is Western aligned, and given enough opportunity and given enough backing, can self-sustain a war. We should take advantage of it. Number one, because it's in our national interest to weaken Russia, because they will do everything they can to weaken us and our alliances. I think we should be the coordinator of the effort of freedom, right? Talking to European leaders, it's not necessarily the money that they're unhappy about, that we're not giving money. It's the fact that we're not really leading anymore. We were in the past the leader in Western Europe, in Europe in general, when it came to these types of operations. We were the coalescer. We were the ones that would say, okay, France, you're going to give this, Germany, you're going to do this. We're going to back you up here. The fact is that we're kind of stepping back and creating this void of leadership in a very difficult situation, scares them and only empowers Russia too. And the people that really empowers is China in the end, because they're seeing how easily they could fray our alliances, and they're taking note of what they're going to be able to do when they want to make a move on Taiwan. And what they're seeing is all it takes is a couple of very conservative podcasters, get the right type of people elected to the Senate and the House, and that's enough for them to affect foreign policy and long-term foreign policy. And this is just dumb in the end. We need Europe to be with us. China is a big, big economy with a lot of people. The only way to leverage any type of power against China is we're going to have a lot of friends. And right now we are losing friends every day, not necessarily to China, but just not to help us. And how we act in Ukraine is going to affect all those relationships.
So I'm stealing Scott's thunder a little bit by asking this question, but I want to talk to you about young men. So Scott has a new book out, Notes on Being
I've been talking about them all year too. Yeah,
totally. Which is, the ball fell on me. So I'm going to start the man conversation. Sure. But you're one of the only prominent Democratic voices that talks like a normal human being and has been successful in connecting with men. I use your line from your New York Times interview that men just want to buy a big fucking truck. They don't care if you have enough money to, have a G-Wagon. They just want to be rich too, right? And to have that kind of opportunity. Can you talk to us a little bit about, how you campaign and how you've been able to connect with men, and specifically, what kinds of programs do you think that we should be putting into place to make sure that men can live up to their full potential?
Well, first, let's just talk about campaigning. The one thing I did is when I talked on campaign, I never talked in generalities. I actually talked about men also. I wouldn't just say, it's important for families to be able to support their kids. I would say, we want a man and a husband to be able to make enough money to support his family, to save for retirement, to take their kids on vacation, right? We didn't make them absent in this conversation.
So you did some identity politics, just
a
very
lot of identity
effectively.
Politics.
Yeah.
It wasn't like some genius thing. I talked about what, I'm a husband. I have three kids. I had two then. I grew up not in the best situations. I had to raise my sisters from a young age. And I understand the heavy weight that a father, a husband, and a man carries. By the way, it doesn't mean that women don't either, right? But what Democrats need to be able to understand is that you can talk about taking care of men without feeling that you're insulting women or insulting their position. And one of the benefits of kind of representing a very working class Latino and Black area is that, talking to even single women that are raising boys, they would tell you that they want, men in their lives that are well-adjusted, that have good salaries. They want their kids to be it. I think for some reason, Democrats got into this notion that we couldn't somehow prioritize the feelings of men, of fathers, of husbands, without somehow diminishing the status of women. And I've never accepted that. And I think being raised in a family of four Latino women was also very helpful and instructive for me. So now to the policy. The policy is not necessarily the easiest thing, but some things is very simple, right? What I remember growing up is I remember taking pride every time I was earning an extra hour, right? So whether it was overtime pay or just knowing that, I just, cracked 20 hours this week. That means I have depending on how much money I was making then, I think when I first started working, it was like $4 an hour. But like that meant something, right? My effort, my wages that were hard earned was going to do some type of stability or bring something of net worth or value to my family. I think we need to get back to that. We need to make sure that your work means something. So first of all, we need to make sure that there's a consistent rising of wages. The biggest mistake we did as Democrats is that we dropped the minimum wage, and we just, every time we put up the fight for it, we just kind of dropped and let it on. We should A, make sure that minimum wage catches up, and B, that it never falls behind. Should always be indexed to inflation. Like we index Social Security, like we index VA payments, all this kind of stuff. Why are we letting wages of working class people fall behind every year? If we had not done that, the average minimum wage, right now would be somewhere around the mid-20s. Instead, you have places that are still, in the low teens, some places even less than that. We have to prioritize people being able to do what we used to consider very, very simple, but housing. And not housing just for the sake of housing, but we have to understand the emotional meaning behind housing. And when it comes to men being able to buy a home, it means that they're able to step out on their own, that they are essentially now becoming their own person, be able to start their own family. If they're living at home with their parents, it is not good. That is what's happening to a lot of men right now. I do think that we actually have to also purposely be looking at programs that are actually targeted at men, like we have done for other groups. For example, whether it's, groups of color, whether it's African-American men, Latinos, Latinas, whatever, or women, like why not also have programs that are aimed at men? Because if you look at statistically speaking, men are doing well. But because it's men, we don't actually think that they're worth our time and investment. One thing that I think simply we could do is we should encourage men to be teachers again. The amount of men that are leaving teaching is growing exponentially. I grew up without a father. Most of my male figures were people I worked with at work sites, uncles, and teachers throughout my whole life. Male teachers that showed me what it meant to be a responsible man. Right now, because teacher pay is down, but also because we just haven't prioritized making the teaching profession something that should be engaged by men. Males are just leaving, and they end up being the ones that are in school, ends up always being the coaches, the security guards, everything else like that. So having specific programs to get men into teaching would go a long way. And then lastly, simple things that just don't exist anymore that used to exist when I was growing up, right? The community bonds that allow men to be around other men that are good role models. I'll give you a good example. My son started in Little League or Coach Pitch League last year. And it was amazing to see, the 4 men, on the off time helping these kids. And they were just great role models, like no swearing, teaching them about teamwork. And it made me think like this is actually rarer and rarer every day. As a matter of fact, sports are getting more and more elite. So every day, working class boys and girls don't actually have much access to equitable sports. And so there should be a massive effort by the federal government, local government, to really encourage extracurriculars again for our kids. We should be subsidizing Little League, Pop Warner leagues, Boy Scouts, everything else like that, because the days of having enough volunteer efforts to take care of these are non-existent. But those are the places where, boys get off the internet or get off social media, meet other well-adjusted men and meet other boys and learn how to interact with each other outside of the digital screen. And so being able to take kids out camping, take kids, and tell them to play together, like that stuff matters. And we had that all growing up, and we don't have it anymore. And we try to replace it by other means. But it's that type of kind of soft therapy every day that makes a big difference for these boys.
Yeah.
So, Senator, what I find, and this is my frustration with my fellow progressives, is that We've been talking, you brought up the notion of minimum wage. If it had just kept pace with inflation or productivity, it'd be $23. It's not, it's at $7.25.
Right.
We rail against a tax structure that continues to create massive income inequality. Our tax policy is progressive until you get to the super rich, then it becomes regressive. We've known this for 40 years. And yet, during all this time, we knew healthcare was broken, education costs. Even when we controlled all three houses of government, everything has gone the way that, quite frankly, Republicans would want. And I would describe the Democrats as right, but ineffective.
Voters think the same.
And more focused on grabbing for social virtue than actually affecting the material or psychological well-being of Americans. So I'll make a thesis here. The Democratic Party needs a disruptor like a Donald Trump, and that the Democratic Party right now is falling into what Clinton says: people prefer strong and wrong than right and weak. And we just feel, smell, and look right and weak. A, do you agree with that? And B, what kind of structural reform within the party would you like to see?
I do think we look weak. Now, the flashes of not weakness have produced popularity, right? So us standing up for, the ACA example showed people like, oh, damn, these guys got a fight in them. The structural things we need to change are a couple of things. Number one, we're kind of screwed for a little bit. But the first thing we have to do is, number one, should we take power, we have to get rid of the filibuster. It's just very simple. All the economic gains you're talking about, a lot of them we did want to do, but for one or two senators, enough senators, it was enough to filibuster some of these efforts. It just has to go. We're never going to be able to do some of these economic surges that we need for working class people if we're going to have always one or two mansions or cinemas that are just going to be holding things up, right? And that is a frustration I hear from voters all the time. We get you in power, but you never do anything. And they're right. And a lot of it's not because the whole caucus doesn't want to do it. It's because you have a couple of people that just hold out, use this ancient system, and then we get nothing. And then it creates this horrible loop where people don't want to vote for Democrats. So that's structural thing number one. I think, the way that we nominate people, it's hard to change. But I think if I was the party, the first debate I would have would be a debate entirely on the life of working class people. What we saw in 2020 was a lot of different groups having their debates first. What ends up binding all Democratic coalition voters, and some of us knew this instinctively, some of us didn't, is actually working class issues. Being able to live well, dream well, feel comfortable, and be able to know that you're going to give your kids a future. That's the stuff that binds Asians, Latinos, African Americans, the LGBT community. Yes, we have other issues under that umbrella, but what happened is why Democrats slipped with everyone in 2024 is because the one binding thing that people trusted us with, we messed up. Something I observed talking to Latino men in Arizona in 2024. They were mad at Democrats because they felt betrayed, because we were supposed to be the people that are always looking out for them, looking out for people in poverty, and they felt poor. These were men that were working their whole lives and always thought they could always work their way out of a problem. And now they weren't feeling that anymore. And we weren't actually coming up and giving them solutions or even kind of an empathetic ear. And Donald Trump wasn't that much better, but at least he was kind of closer in that world to them when it comes to trying to bring a solution, whether it's tax on tips or tax on overtime, right? The Democratic position has to be one first aimed at true family economics, and actually understanding that, people want to have stabilized, people want to have kids, people want to have houses. Let's prioritize that first. And if we take care of all that stuff and we take care of, then everyone else is going to feel fine when we take care of all these other issues that are still part of the Democratic, I would say, principles.
Senator Gallego, thank you so much for your time. It was so good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, Senator.
Adios.
Jess, what do you think?
I mean, I'm like a Gallego truther. So I love him. He's just...
A goother?
Oh, a goother.
Gallego truther.
He just talks like a normal human being.
Yeah.
And it's refreshing to hear it. He definitely has ideas. What he did worked in a battleground state. And, you know, he's been in New Hampshire and Iowa, a lot of swirl about whether he's thinking about 2028. And I think he'd be an interesting force to have on the debate stage. What do you think?
Yeah. So I'm not that familiar with Senator Gallego, and I'm really happy we got a chance to speak to him. And I think he's a fantastic voice in the Senate. And let me just play identity politics. I don't believe that wealthy people or people who grew up in dual parent households, I think they can sympathize with low-income households, but they can't really empathize. And we need senators and we need leaders who have actually made huge sacrifices to go overseas and be in a command and control structure and know what it's like to lose people. And, you know, the Lima Company had huge casualties. He understands what it means to commit to your country and devotion and fidelity to the flag and real fucking sacrifice, not going on TikTok with a ring light. So I like the fact that, you know, someone like that is making decisions around when and when not we go to war. Also, I just love the fact that he played a role in raising his sisters and that he was surrounded by women. I think he understands or is going to be more thoughtful about the group of people who deserve more representation because unfortunately they don't vote. And old people who do vote keep voting themselves more fucking money. And that is we need more representation of people in single parent homes and the children that are in those homes. So I think he's a really important voice in the Senate.
Yeah. I mean, Arizona is really having a moment with Mark Kelly and Ruben Gallego. And
yeah, aren't they?
They totally are. And I just want to note, you know, Gallego went to Harvard too, but he doesn't sound like a lot of these bots that come out of Harvard, right?
He sounds like a dude. He sounds like a guy you could grab a Modelo with. And
Exactly. And
see how I incorporated the Latino beer into
you're so inclusive.
I am so culturally sensitive. Or is that cultural appropriation?
Whatever it is, it's fine. I don't know what his beer is.
What's your favorite beer? My favorite is Modelo.
Are you just saying that because we're having this conversation?
A little bit.
That's fine. I'm not a big beer person.
I'm going for the Latino vote in case I run, but also
in case I run. That's how you're going to win them over. Anyway, Gallego,
I'm on the Cialis ticket. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Gallego is doing the right stuff right now. He's talking about the issues we need to. We didn't get to talk to him about some of his text messages were leaked where he was making fun of the Democratic Party, which I think honestly only made him look better.
Fine.
And I liked what he had to say in particular about like doing identity politics. Like there's a way to do it effectively without pandering to a group with like 4 people in it. So
I stopped listening because a wave of fear came over me about the ability to leak someone's text messages.
Well, I think you just like screenshot.
I can't run for dog catcher now.
Oh.
Ugh.
I'm sorry, but enjoy that Modelo.
There you go.
Okay.